Coming to you live from my new apartment. So, not that podcast, but this is the Tectonic Takes podcast. It's our first podcast recording from my new apartment. No longer living at home, so that's exciting. But we also had a very exciting game recently between the San Jose Earthquakes and LA Galaxy with a lot of highs, lows, and unfortunately, those lows occurred when it counted. But Abram, it's been a while since I've been in a podcast with you. How have you been?
It has been a while. I've been good. You kind of like put all the responsibilities in my hand, and I've been doing my best to carry it on. It's been hard. You have a hard job. I can't lie, but I mean, it's been fun, and I'm glad to have you back.
Right. I definitely wish I could have been there to talk with you, Devin, and Angelo when we were covering the Vancouver Whitecaps preview show, which was the first game back from the MLS Leagues Cup break. But it was a busy last couple of weeks with a trip to New York, with the start of the new semester here at SF State and College of Marin. But thankfully, despite teaching a class that's in the evenings at College of Marin, we were able to get out where I could watch most of the second half of LA Galaxy. And then, of course, before this podcast, I watched the first half and made sure I had the complete picture. But as I was getting those notifications, I just remember seeing the first goal notification. And not only was it, disappointing because it was a Galaxy goal, FootMob for some reason said San Jose scored and then put the Galaxy 1, Quake 0 goal. So you're not doing your job correctly, FootMob. Granted, they have thousands of games to do notifications for. Maybe one mistake that I know of is warranted. But you just annoyed me on too many different levels in that one notification. But then we get the back-to-back goals for the Quakes as well. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a great first half. I'm bummed I'm in class. And obviously, when I'm teaching, I do give my 99% attention to my students. The 1% is like, okay, if I'm walking around, I happen to see my phone flash, and I usually have it, behind a podium or something, so it's not a distraction. But it is the Quakes. I do see the notifications. I'm not necessarily stopping class to interact with it or check on the game, but it was something that I couldn't help but notice, mainly because it was the Cali Classico. It was just San Jose Earthquakes versus Chicago Fire. I would just wait until after class to catch up with that. But Abram, were you at the game?
Yeah, I was at the game. It was the first one in a long, long time. I missed it there. I did get I got one of the stadium bobbleheads, which is cool. I did see a lot of them in the trash, which was, I was like, do we just not appreciate this stuff? But I mean, I love it. I want it like in my collection and stuff like that.
And then fans will complain if it's a couple months since the last giveaway of that kind. Like, if you want bobbleheads, you better not throw them away. It may not be the coolest bobbleheads ever, but still, like, it's free stuff. Like, and it's completely voluntary. You can just simply decline it. And there were many people in our Discord server that are like, "Oh man, I wish I was there. I wish someone could have gotten one for me." And so, yeah, that's just like unfortunate behavior there. I mean, if we're just declining bobbleheads, that's one thing, but just throwing them away, at the very least, have the decency to take them home and then throw them away. But, doing it in the stadium, that's just, I feel bad for the people that put the time and effort into, designing them and making them, marketing them. But there were some sources of frustration in that game. And many of them were tied to obviously three goals. One conceded at the very beginning of the game, and then two conceded very simultaneously in the beginning of the second half. But not only that, they were tied to the refereeing. We hate making a narrative about poor refereeing. It's a played out thing to do. This time, the refereeing was so bad that Luchi Gonzalez explicitly said so, that he wasn't even trying to be coy or say it in a very under the radar way, where it's like, oh, there was a few decisions here and there where we didn't agree with the referee. He didn't even use that kind of terminology. So if Luchi Gonzalez does pick up a fine in the next week or so, now you know why. But as someone who was there, how did you feel the refereeing was throughout the game.
It was uh, atrocious. Um, I mean, so we can't say that they didn't deserve that penalty. It was there was contact in the box. That's
Yeah.
it. We can't say that we deserved that final goal. It was offsides. That's it, right? But everything else in between was terrible. Every foul, everything was just. I remember one time when the ball went out on our right side, and the AR wasn't looking at the ball. She was just looking off into the distance at the last man, like she should be keeping track of him, but she didn't look at the ball go out, and then she called it the wrong way, the throw in, and I was like, this is just a team of bad officials, and I'm not going to get fined for saying it, so I get to say it all I want. No, today was especially, yesterday was especially bad. And I think Lucy wouldn't have, come out and said anything if it wasn't a very badly refed game. I will say though that I do not support um, the way that we showed our frustration with the ref, where we started throwing water bottles onto the field and other projectiles. Um, it broke my heart to see Jeremy Abobasi and JT Marcinkowski. Like they came over to the. It was in front of the ultras. It wasn't the ultra throwing it. I'm near the ultras where I sit. It was the group behind the ultras, like above them, and they're just like throwing the stuff. And I'm watching, and then Jeremy looks so disappointed, and he's the guy that I look up to because of what he does off the field, and to see him just like look at us, hit the fan base, like that, it made me feel a certain type of way. And then same thing with JT after the game, he came over and he was like, "Don't do that," but they were throwing them as he was, trying to plead with them to stop. And there's kids down there, the ball boys and girls trying to run out and like not get hit by the flying water bottles, and it was a really disappointing sight to see. If you're one of those fans doing so, we don't really. That's not what we do here. We that's not our culture, and it's not something that I want to see happen very often. Even though I agree, I'm on the other side because the refereeing was terrible, but it's just never acceptable to do those things.
Just part of being a mature adult is channeling your frustration in a productive manner, like on a podcast. So,
Right.
yeah, like there's so many different, more productive things you can do with your time than littering and putting projectiles in harm's way and putting people in harm's way with your projectiles. We don't care if the projectiles are in harm's way, but we don't want any projectiles whatsoever. So, yeah, let's not do that ever again. And another point of talking in this match was the attendance. It wasn't a packed house, but at the same time, it's very tough for this market to have a packed stadium on a Wednesday. That's just the fact of the matter. When you're dealing with San Jose, you're dealing with Bay Area traffic. People have work and school and other obligations. And during these peak traffic hours, you could leave your house if you're like not in the San Jose area. If you leave your house at 4, it could still be like a 1.5 to 2 hour drive just to get to the stadium. Not to mention getting to the stadium, and then of course the line to get into the stadium, the parking situation, all that. So there's a lot of people that, as much as this is the most important fixture for the San Jose Earthquakes most seasons, it's not always worth the hassle, and people genuinely hate traffic. The fear of traffic prevents people from doing a lot of fun things, and there's just a lot of different circumstances where even if you're a diehard San Jose Earthquakes fan, even if this is the biggest game on the calendar, I understand if you did not attend this, as well as there was also the factor that if you could only attend one California Clasico the whole season, and your options are this Wednesday game in PayPal Park, which I love PayPal Park, but it doesn't have the gravitas of the Saturday in July Stanford Stadium. Most people are going to pick the Stanford option. Abram, your thoughts on how the vibe was with the attendance?
Well, I already shared how I feel about yesterday's crowd. I'm already disappointed in them enough as it is, but yeah, we didn't show up. And to be honest, on a Wednesday game, it's hard.
Mhm.
Personally, I drove 250 miles yesterday before the game.
Wow.
I drive for a living, and I started in San Jose. And I went up to Vallejo, Novato, all around, and then I had to come back to San Jose. And I didn't want to be honest. I didn't feel like doing it, but I'm a huge fan of the team, and I wanted to see us win the Cali Classica. And unfortunately, they didn't repay me with that favor. But yeah, I guess the feeling of not wanting to was shared amongst a lot of the people who usually support the Quakes, because I've seen um, kind of less. Less important fixtures for us be more packed. But because it was a Wednesday, that's probably like the most obvious thing we can attribute it to. But it was still disappointing because there was a lot of empty seats out there.
Yeah. It's not to say there aren't people that have atypical work schedules. And if you are one of those people, you're able to get the day off or you work a different schedule that this lined up with yours. That's great. But that's just how scheduling works. And you try to accommodate the 34 fixtures in a calendar, especially dealing with MLS. This is other competitions that they're involved in, such as Leagues Cup, and that's what happens. Uh, it is disappointing for the fans though because they do appreciate the energy that usually comes from these rivalry games. If they can sell out a stadium, or at the very least, if you're in Levi Stadium or Stanford Stadium, have that 40,000, 50,000 strong crowd, it does make a huge difference. That being said, I do know that the supporters that were there for the right reasons, they still made that uh, atmosphere what it normally is in San Jose Quakes games. You can feel it, it's palpable, and it's positive. And I think that is in no small part what helped the San Jose Quakes get those two quick fire goals, responding to being 1-0 down. So why don't we talk a little bit about the game, starting with that first half, Abram?
So, oh my God, it's like we had been asleep for 3 weeks and then came back to play soccer like an hour after waking up because they looked terrible. Jackson Newell was someone who I was excited to see play, who I think that has a really big influence on our the way that we play and our midfield, not just the way that we defend. He does a lot of he covers a lot of ground, but also offensively he carries the ball with him. He makes passes to bring our team forward, but he couldn't get a pass off to save his life for the first 30 minutes. He looked out of it. I don't know what it was. We looked out of shape. We looked tired in the first half. At one point, I saw Cade Cowell, who is another inconsistent player. When we were defending a corner, he went over to Jackson. He was like, "Hey, turn it on! Like, come on!" And it's just interesting to see Cade, a young guy, especially one who is like he seems like a quiet dude most of the time. He was like, "Come on," even he could see it. But Jackson did improve, thankfully, and then we did end up getting those two quick fire goals. The first one was luck. We can't deny that. That was a deflection off of the LA Galaxy defender that went into the goal, and then we scored really quickly after that.
Yeah, and it is great to see. Initially, it was Espinoza and Abobasi credited with the two goals. It would have been nice if Espinoza could have gotten credit somehow, but given the circumstances, there's just no way. You got to rule that an own goal. It may not help him with the goal contributions and the MVP candidacy, which it was going to take a lot for him to reinsert himself into that conversation. It was great that he was potentially in that conversation for maybe the first few months of the season, but that's just how it went. And it's not just him in MLS now. There's even more and more Argentine number 10s that he's contending with, among other great players like Kanye Mukhtar. So that's fine. You still are MVP. And the most important thing was we went into the half 2-1, which was something that I thought that was a great show of character. Normally, Quakes are conceding an equalizer or a go behind goal going to halftime, or just looking a little bit lifeless. Like, okay, the game is happening, but it seems like we're reacting to it more than we're influencing it. And of course, that's kind of what it reverted to in the second half. Not a whole lot we could have done with that second Galaxy goal, though. Ricky Page is just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I was annoyed about it at first. I thought that I mean, we need to close him down. You see him
Mhm.
getting the ball, then you already need to you need to be in the space to, uh, get in front of him, not let him have that space because he will take it. He'll take every inch that you give him, and it was frustrating. But then I watched the replay right before we started recording, and it's like, what are you gonna do? He runs fast. He's really good. So it's rough, but it hurt at the time, definitely.
Yeah, the thing that I found the most problematic with that goal was that it did indicate how rough of a night it was for the likes of Jackson Mules and Carlos Grezzo, simply because of the workload. They weren't getting a bit more support in those situations there. Someone like Jamir Montero, we do expect when we're not in possession that he is able to be like that line of defense before a Yule or a Grezzo, especially in a game where they've been covering a lot of ground and expending a lot of energy. And when that sort of breaks down, which is why the midfield has been a point of contention these last couple of games, that can happen. There's so many skilled players in MLS now. Ricky Puig is one of them that will punish you and can shoot from distance. And Puig only has like 5 goals in the season. He's not who LA Galaxy intended on being a goal provider at a very consistent basis. That guy, unfortunately, Chicharito is out for the season, and Martin Caceres is out for a long time. So he is forced to step up even more because of these leaders being absent for LA Galaxy, and yet he continues to do so there. And then the third goal was a penalty, and it was Joe Village who scored it. He has scored so many goals against the San Jose Earthquakes, and more frustrating than that for me is the fact that 6 penalties conceded this season puts San Jose Earthquakes tied for the lead in that category. A category no one wants to lead, and when it comes to penalties, you still have to make challenges in the box, but you have to be smarter about it. And I think that it's an indicator that despite the experience in this back line, these aren't really kids that you're relying on, with the exception of Tanner Beeson, and even he's the same age as Jackson Ewell. Um, if he's like the kid in there, then this is a really experienced group age wise. Then why do we keep making the same mistakes over and over? And I was concerned at first when I first heard that Jonathan Mensah was blamed on the commentary for the penalty, because Mensah has given up some penalties earlier this season. And now in this case, it was Miguel Trauco who, yeah, when he's shining for the Quakes, we notice him more for his offensive flair than his defensive stoutness. But this is an area where Trauco really would have liked it back. There was a bit of a check to see what was going on with the penalty, but I don't think as the minutes passed, there was any hope that you were expecting it to be overturned, right?
Yeah, I mean, looking back at it, it was a penalty. Trauco, kind of went in too hard. He didn't have to. That was the issue. It was a lapse of judgment. We all make those, but unfortunately, he made it inside the box. And yeah, there was never a chance that they were going to look at that particular play and deem it as a clean tackle, because it wasn't. It wasn't Mensah's fault, though. We had to stop blaming him, even though
Yeah.
sometimes it is his fault. I thought Mensah, just to shed some light on Mensah today, he was very good. I liked how solid he is. His aura as well is just makes us just feel better. His connection with Rodriguez too makes Rodriguez feel like more empowered to do Rodriguez things. So yeah, Mensa I think for me earned his spot back. But we'll have to see what Lucci thinks.
And that's how it should be. Jonathan Mensah has been a starter in this league for so long, and we expect that level of play for him. This is the type of Jonathan Mensah that I think of when I see him playing on the field. And he has that ability to really stabilize defense and be a leader in the back there. And Rodriguez as well, he had a bit of a impactful game. He was very, very close to having that equalizer, and it was just like a fraction offside. Again, similar to the penalty, you were hoping that somehow the call would go our way, but as you see the replay a few times, you just know in your heart of hearts, okay, we're not getting this one. It sucks.
Yeah, but the thing is, those calls have gone against us so many times. Like
Yeah.
those kind of like 60-40, like, okay, maybe it is. No, the refs are always like, screw San Jose and all their fans. Like, we get screwed over so much. And the stat that you cited earlier with the penalties, doesn't that just reflect how often we're getting like screwed over? Because it's just so frustrating, and it always seems to be us. I can only like recall one game where it was like this ref likes us for whatever reason. In my whole time as a Quakes fan, it just always seems to go against us, and it sucks. It really hurt us tonight.
I actually can recall a game where maybe we were the beneficiary of a good call, and it was actually the last time we played the Galaxy. There was some legitimate claims for maybe Jackson Yule could have gotten a red card, so bullet dodged there. I think when that whole goal is being ruled out for offside, that sequence is happening. You see Lucien Gonzalez; he's livid in the touch line. He is upset, and he's trying to get the referee's attention, calling for some sort of VAR check. And I think that it was a little bit fueled by desperation in the sense that it's the end of the game. We need something. We need to have something change the scoreline. But I do feel like because of his demeanor in the press conference, and he's a great guy, he's very helpful, he's very kind with his time and patient when it comes to press conferences. But he was a bit more mad just at the situation at the game than he normally was. So I feel like he was just frustrated at the situation, and it just added more fuel to the fire there. And I will say, with the way that the Quakes responded from going down 3-2, I was expecting, with how the momentum shifted, for it just to be a struggle to keep it at 3-2, like avoid conceding a fourth before they could have a chance to get a third. Instead, the Quakes took it up a notch. They were very confident in possession. They threw everyone forward when they could, but it wasn't necessarily desperation. They were calculated attacks. They're moving in transition. They're moving in unison, making slick passes, impactful crosses, while not neglecting their defensive responsibilities after that. It didn't feel like there was any chance that the Galaxy had after scoring their third that I was like, oh, they should have scored the fourth. So I felt like that was a good sign. So yeah, no one's happy losing to your biggest rival. No one's happy losing when you're like starting to become in that zone where it could all go shit for us. We could lose out on a playoff spot if we continue to slide. We would like to have at least a point there to stop that slide coming off of the loss against Sporting Kansas City. But I can't be too critical of the players' efforts. There's some individual performances like Matthew Hoppe, which was universally panned across social media and through the discussions we've had with people. We'll talk about him next. But collectively, the coaching, the tactics, the players' efforts, I felt like the Quakes are still showing that they're a good team in MLS. It's just this was an unfortunate game. It was an unfortunate result, not an undeserved loss, but one where a few things here and there changed. We were having a different conversation. So Hoppy, honestly, for me, the thing that stood out to me was actually a really good chance he had to score, and I didn't think it was a bad miss. It was a save, but other than that, it was a bit of an uninspiring performance, right?
Yeah. I have a few things to say about him.
Hmm.
For me, the most disappointing moment was when he had a shot on his right foot. He did really well to muscle his defender and get that half chance. And if he shot, I believe he could have scored because I do think that he has quality. But he decided to take the touch inside and take another touch to try and get even more space. He got greedy, and I was like, "What are you doing, man?" I was so frustrated. And the second thing I want to say about him is that he feels like he has a chip on his shoulder in that he thinks that because he's a European player, he can come in here and be the best,
Hmm.
And, he does have quality. He showed that. He does have ability, and he reads the game well. He has good control. He strikes the ball well. But the thing is, like, when Espinosa came to this team, I had a similar thought about him where I thought that he felt like he could take on the whole team just simply because he was a European player coming to the MLS. And Espinosa lost the ball consistently when he played his first few games here. And
Yeah.
eventually, because he's a smart player, he learned that he can't just take on the whole team. He does have to pass and make runs off the ball and do all the things, and then your quality will start to show when you're actually doing the right things. Hoppy seemed like I could take an extra touch because I have the quality or whatever, and it was just one or two touches too many every time. Every single time it was just like a little bit too slow. Where if he played that pass when he should have, uh, something might have come off. And I don't think that Cade Cowell had an amazing performance. I think that he did good things, but it turned out to be that we lost production when bringing on Hoppy because just how poorly he played.
Yeah. It's not as dire of a situation coming from Europe to MLS as someone like Gideon Zalalem, who was the Arsenal Academy product. It was a big get to have him declare for U.S. men's national team status, but he arrived in Sporting Kansas City in 2019, having not made a senior competitive appearance for Arsenal. He made 9 appearances for Sporting Kansas City, 7 for Swope Park Rangers in the USL Championship, and then about 19 appearances across 3 seasons in New York City, and now he plays in the second tier Netherlands. So it's not a set in stone path that just because you're proven that you can be contracted to a European team that you're gonna immediately become a superstar in MLS. It usually, in theory, does help because MLS is obviously not as strong of a league as the top leagues in Europe, but it still depends on you. You still have to put in the work. And 2 game sample size from Matthew Hoppy, he has a lot of work to do. It's a different system. Maybe, we're not playing to his skill sets. Maybe he's overthinking it. It's a lot of nerves for a lot of people when they are a recent transfer, especially in a situation where he's in an area of need. We need him to perform sooner rather than later because, as they were discussing in the aftershock, we need some of these players to come in for a game to give players that have been playing so many minutes this season a rest. I think of guys like Espinoza and Abobasi up top that have played a lot of 90 minutes under the belt in chunks. Carlos Grezzo, for example, is another player that has played so many minutes this season, and he looked exhausted in this game. And if you can't rely on Matthew Hoppy to take some of those minutes for just a game and then allow him to recover and start the next game, if you can't rely on maybe Michael Baldissimo to give Carlos Grezzo a break, then we have a problem with depth once again, and we're back where we started. I remember earlier this season, Dom and the Quakes After 90 podcast, he talked for like 30 minutes, it felt like, about the Quakes' problem with depth, paper thin depth, that one player can cause the whole deck to crumble down. And unfortunately, we're still in that situation. And it can be frustrating looking at the not just the favorite MLS teams like the Inter Miami and LAFC that okay, we expect them to have depth, but I think of a team like Sporting Kansas City where their problem right now is trying to fit guys like Eric Tommy, Nemanja Radoja, Gadi Kinda, Johnny Russell, Alan Polito, Walter, and so many other players to get them all on the field at the same time. And they have a lot of options too. They've dealt with injuries this season, but they have a lot of players that, even if they're not starting every match, the drop off from starter to the next player up isn't as big as what we experienced with the San Jose Earthquakes. So going into the last 8 games of the season, when we got Minnesota up next, we need other players to show that they're not a liability. And there are a few players that are going to be easy scapegoats because of the expectations attached to them or because they're new transfers. A lot of eyes are on Hoppy and Akinola in particular, hoping to provide some of that spark. But we do see some examples of how with Ayo Canola that he had a bit of a goal scoring drought and he's still really going through it. And we can see why that maybe he couldn't have been a part of the solution in Toronto, but we're happy to have him here and to prove us wrong. Your final thoughts about this game, Abram?
Yeah, I thought that for most of the match we weren't up to it. Um, Sometimes you have one of those days where the whole team is experiencing like just this fatigue, and that's what it looked like. It looked like we were playing at altitude at home, and it was crazy. It was really disappointing. I I had to mute the Discord at some point because I was just like, I'm just done thinking about this game, and the only reason I like I looked up the highlights because like I have to do an episode. But if you had someone else to do today, I wouldn't. I would just try really hard to get this game out of my memory. And in fact, I'm gonna do that after we finish. So yeah, I'm hoping to move on from this game as soon as possible. We do have to. I think for playoff implications, it was a huge game. Not just because it was a Galaxy, it was a huge game for us this season. Um, I do think we're going to make the playoffs, but for getting a home spot, this game was the one we needed. After losing, the last game 3-0, we're going to have to like pull off an upset at some point to get us back on track. I feel like, that's why it sucks so much. It's not just that we lost against the Galaxy; it's that this might screw us up in the future.
Yes. And our away record has been very poor. So you have to take care of business at home to at least give yourself a chance to get that home game. It may not happen because there are some stronger teams in the Western Conference that are going to be strongholds in those higher seeds, but at least give yourself a chance to fight for that spot. And now that chance is slipping away. You're now in survival mode. This next game against Minnesota United, they're the spot above us in the table in seventh. And whoever wins that game is going to be above the other team come the end of Saturday's action. Looking at Minnesota United, they've only gotten stronger as the season gone on. Of course, the big acquisition was Norwich and Finnish international Teemu Pukki up top, which has solved a bit of an issue. Luis Amarillo was not the guy for them. Teemu Pukki is adjusting to life pretty quickly here in Minnesota. You got the acquisition. He was a former NYC player before going abroad and then coming back. Ismail Tajuri Stradi is an underrated winger. Of course, you have Dane St. Clair, who is a very effective keeper in the Canada national team setup. And then some exciting players like Sang Bing Jong and the name's escaping me. They're South African winger. I'm going to try to look it up real quick. It's Bongo Kule Longwane. So, yeah, he is an incredible player. He was competing at one point with Lionel Messi about 4 or 5 games in to the Leagues Cup tournament for the Golden Boot. So he is a capable player as well. But unfortunately for Minnesota, he is among their injuries along with Robin Lode. But Minnesota as well is our bogey team. I think back to that incredibly clutch 3-2 win where Marcos Urena scored the decisive goal for the San Jose Earthquakes to beat Minnesota United and get us to the playoffs, where we then got thwomped by Vancouver. But since then, I feel like Minnesota has made it personal, and they've beaten us almost every chance we've gotten. They knocked us out in the MLS's back cup 3 years ago. So they know exactly how to beat us, and something's got to give to change this rock paper scissors relationship we have with them being scissors and us being paper. But what are you hoping to see from this Minnesota United game?
Look, I would love to get back on track and start winning again. That's a given.
Yeah,
But I just, in my heart, it's more important to me that we start playing like a team and like actually show people what we could do again. Because I think that we're starting to lose hope here as a Quakes fan. Um, we started off the season really well, and we are above where we were last season still, and we still have to give Lucy credit for that. But I think that good uh, credit has is running out. It is running out, and we're doing worse than we should because we're a better team than what we're showing. Um, and it's just like we just need a good performance, just like to show everyone the quality that we do have, and we haven't been doing so. Um, so that's what I want, and I know that's not a great answer to say. I want us to play good, but no, I need our midfield to step up. Montero
the
and
midfield, absolutely.
right, that specifically I would say is Montero hasn't been great. Yule needs to get back into it. Ever since his suspension, he's been kind of like out of it. He he
Shaky.
he copied Ken's haircut, and then
Oh,
he just been in a funk. And it's rough. We're in a rough spot right now. It's a dark time to be a Quakes fan because we're so close, right? But then it's starting to rain on us, and bad things are starting to happen. So if Montero and Yule can step up, then it'll like enfranchise our attack to start firing on all cylinders and give our defense some support, and then it'll kind of like stabilize everything, in my opinion. So that's what I'm looking for specifically.
and I went right into justification mode when it came to explaining why this may not have been the worst loss in terms of the context of the game. But ultimately, it is a results business. At this point in the season, we do need the results. And while we can feel aggrieved, all's fair in love, war, and soccer. Like, we're going to lose some games where it may not feel unfair, but that's how it goes. LA Galaxy, they got their goals. They're able to ride the storm, and we fell off. So we got to win this game against Minnesota United. It's going to be a very important test because we're evenly matched. We're right next to each other in the table. This is going to be a big indicator of who this team really is. And you lose a big chunk of that buffer by not picking up any points on Wednesday against LA Galaxy. You're going to have pretty much no buffer if you come up empty again this Saturday. So that's where we're at. I don't like to be one of those overly negative people. We do have some of those people within our fan base that almost every time we lose, it's like the sky is falling. But a lot of that negativity in a healthy and logical sense is warranted. We can feel a little bit nervous right now going into this game against Minnesota and expect the worst, hope for the best. That's how a lot of fans feel right now. I will not be at that game because I'm going to a friend's wedding. I'm going to look to go to the September 16th game against Real Salt Lake. Shout out to our friends at the Royal Right Pod. Hopefully, maybe we can bring one or two of them into a podcast in the future. I've not formally invited them yet. That's probably going to be the next thing I do once we finish recording. But that will be it for today. It is great to talk to you again, Abram. I think that for this game, it was important that we focus mostly on this game. We did talk about a lot of broad topics over the last few podcasts that I was here, analyzing some of the other events across the league, across the League's Cup, across international soccer. But it feels good to be back, focusing on the San Jose Earthquakes, even in this context. It's still going to be a hopefully satisfying season as long as we continue to fight and get over the line.
No, I totally agree, and I'm glad you're back. Please don't leave again. Taking notes the way that you take notes is very hard, and I hope to not do have to do that again. So yeah, I'm glad you're back.
Right. I've been taking notes, but it's mostly been taking notes from my lesson plans. But I am very much excited to continue updating my like MLS notes and get back to that in our next podcast. So thank you all, as always, for listening. We look forward to seeing you at a game, interacting with you on Twitter, Discord, whatever the case may be. And we're still very happy to be part of the San Jose Earthquakes fan base. Go Quakes.
Go Quicks.